Okay, so this is the second in the series, Why I Don't Hate Donald Trump and Why You Should Not Either, in which we expose the lies of the mainstream media, also known as the lamestream media. Today we'll be taking on the patent falsehood that Donald Trump once labeled all Mexicans as rapists. This is going to be a fairly short debunking, and the brief PBS clip I'm going to play for you is again from Trump Tower in New York City, in which on June 16, 2015, he formally announces his candidacy for the office of president. He speaks here of the southern border, mostly unprotected at that time, and the sort of people that Mexico and other foreign nations were sending up to the United States en masse to enter our country illegally. He also brings up the issue of trade and how Mexico, while taking full economic advantage of a gullible or sold-out America, also facilitated the steady flow onto our soil of undocumented immigrants, including potential criminals, drug smugglers, gang members, human traffickers, etc., which their own governments would rather jettison than jail. Since, in addition to Latin America, he also mentions the Middle East, Trump strongly implies with perfect plausibility that terrorists too are surreptitiously being ushered into our midst. Because that long, lower, multi-state boundary before the advent of Donald's Wall was so porous and under-patrolled, there was actually no way of knowing who came across it. Yet, generally speaking, the fact that these massive crowds of mostly young adult males had not contained the most upright, valued, or solvent of citizens from those countries with whom we compete is only common sense.
When do we beat Mexico at the border? They're laughing at us, at our stupidity. And now they're beating us economically. They are not our friend, believe me. But they're killing us economically. The U.S. has become a dumping ground for everybody else's problems. Thank you. It's true. And these are the best and the finest. When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people. But I speak to border guards, and they tell us what we're getting. And it only makes common sense. It only makes common sense. They're sending us not the right people. It's coming from more than Mexico. It's coming from all over South and Latin America, and it's coming probably from the Middle East. But we don't know, because we have no protection, and we have no competence. We don't know what's happening. And it's got to stop. And it's got to stop fast.
Notice that since he clearly distinguishes between the good people, which he assumes are there, and the malefactors among these migrating mobs, the man inadvertently proves that it is not a racist commentary he is making, but simply a conservative, pro-America populist speech intended to stir up support for his upcoming presidency, along with public awareness for a growing problem that could and does present a grave danger to Americans. This is not about brown versus white. It's about wrong versus right. Some have suggested that a border wall is itself racist, as though the color of a trespasser's skin is the only reason one would ever have to stop him from intruding on their property or breaking into their house. Hundreds of billions of taxpayer dollars, far more than it will ever cost to build that wall, are spent each year on the welfare, schooling, housing, healthcare, hospitalization, processing, and imprisonment of illegal aliens. Then there are the millions in lost jobs, lowered wages, and exported wealth directly resulting from their illegitimate and burdensome presence in a nation that, like any other, must put its own citizens first. Finally, illegals account for a disproportionate percentage of violent crimes committed in America, including, but not limited to, homicide, rape, robbery, kidnapping, and assault. The politicians, protected by private security guards and living in gated communities, who encourage these open border policies, some for easy votes, some for cheap labor, are not typically the targets of such unwelcome advancers, many of whom are repeat offenders that return to perpetuate more crime even after being released or deported. Instead, it is your average working American, and in particular minorities living in urban areas, who become their most frequent victims. Have you observed of late how you don't hear much about the southern border wall in the phony Democrat press? That's because Trump and company have won on that issue. They lost in the lower, liberal circuit courts, but they won in the Supreme Court. He's got the cash, he's got the time, and it's going up like the Fortress of Solitude. Of course, it's a little different than the Fortress of Solitude. It's not made of ice, but will be policed and surveilled by ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, along with the United States Border Patrol, which, although preposterously compared to the Gestapo and the KKK, is 51% Latino. I hope you caught that. More than half of all Border Patrol agents are Hispanic. They're tough, they know what they're doing, and love their job. And did you realize that thanks to President Trump, there are also a total of 27,000 Mexican troops assisting us as well. 12,000 of their military police are blocking U.S.-bound migrants at Mexico's southern border, and another 15,000 are stationed at their own northern boundary with us, all helping to reduce the terrible costs and hardships for American taxpayers which are incurred from unchecked mass migration. To date, we've got well over 400 miles of wall built, either replacing old, dilapidated fencing or else a completely new barrier. And the Army Corps of Engineers with the CBP are erecting approximately 10 new miles each week. By doing this, Trump is keeping his campaign promise to the American people. Have you noticed also how these Soros-funded, government-supplied caravans to the United States have all but stopped? Our numbers at the border have plummeted, and since the Trump administration wisely ended the disastrous catch-and-release policy of their predecessors, which not only incentivized the unlawful breaching of our borders, but actually permitted those caught doing so to freely remain inside the U.S. while awaiting trials that few ever showed up for, the unknown foreign nationals daily encroaching at our doorstep are now ejected. And if these individuals desire a hearing to evaluate their eligibility for admission into the U.S., they could wait in Mexico. Another reason that the exploitative and harmful open borders policy of the Democrats is a losing proposition for them right now is that because of the China or CCP virus, it is more than obvious to every onlooker that a security wall provides for the entire nation an additional and very necessary buffer against the threat of communicable disease. As the president is fond of saying, two things that will never become obsolete are a wheel and a wall. Donald Trump is not a racist. He is not a xenophobe, as Joe Biden called him after he unilaterally shut down travel from China in late January. He is pro-legal immigration. The United States, the most generous nation in the world, takes in through a legitimate process over 1 million migrants every single year. His own wife, Melania, is a legal immigrant from Slovenia. Unfettered and invasory immigration is unfair and disrespectful to the tens of thousands of lawful immigrants who want to come to America to contribute and to gain from its constitution and culture, its robust economy, and unique ideology of equality and individual rights. How would you feel if you'd languished in a line, perhaps for years, with many other hopeful people, for this great benefit to be bestowed upon those lucky or meritorious enough to receive it, and at the last moment a throng of unruly strangers forced their way in front and took your chance away from you? Refugees from Central American states who are truly seeking asylum from religious or political persecution should first seek that asylum from Mexico. The fact that they instead travel the 2,000 plus miles through Mexico in order to arrive at the United States, sometimes still toting and displaying the flags of their own oppressive republics, demonstrates that they are either economic migrants who, like it or not, must go through a legal process to come here, or worse, they are actually criminals, convicts, coyotes, or cartel members. Almost a third of all women and girls, some extremely young, are raped during the arduous journey north. Most of the illicit narcotics, 90% of all heroin, and, courtesy of China, enough deadly fentanyl to kill every American now living is transported into this country across the U.S.-Mexico border. The misinformation that Democrats have spread about what's going on down there, like there are kids in cages who are being separated from their families or that we are running concentration camps at the border are outrageous and appalling. Particularly egregious and what ought to be offensive to any Jew is this last notion that there is somehow an admissible comparison between Nazi death camps during World War II and the clean, safe, well-stocked, well-lit, air-conditioned detainment centers run by the responsible, respectable men and women of ICE. There are no gas chambers here, no ovens, no firing squads, and if in fact these facilities were that terrible, why are so many thousands of people deliberately attempting to escape their own lands, braving all kinds of life-threatening obstacles in order to get into one of them? What sane person ever purposely tried to get themselves arrested so they could take a trip to Dachau or Auschwitz? Separating children from their parents or parents from their children is what usually happens in any moral society when one or more of them commits a serious crime. In many cases, it becomes shockingly clear that it is not their real parents transporting these children over the border, but professional smugglers called coyotes, who use these kids again and again to garner special sympathy or legal advantages for those they are illegally importing into this country. Sometimes the children themselves are being sex trafficked. Since very few of these persons have proper documentation, it is not immediately possible for federal officers to determine what the actual status of the child is, so they are very often obliged, for the sake of conscience if nothing else, to take the minor into protective custody. Obama built those cages that Trump is routinely blamed for, just as Obama has deported far more aliens than Trump has. For purposes of deportation, the Trump administration has focused almost exclusively on violent offenders, such as the notoriously savage MS-13, the brutal members of which are currently being arrested and removed by the thousands by DHS. Some of them are charged with terrorism. U.S. Marshals under Trump have also rescued over 1,300 missing or trafficked children, nearly doubling the annual number of such rescues since he took office in 2017. In addition, early in 2019, Trump cut funding for the Northern Triangle countries of Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala for their failure to prevent and indeed their positive culpability in the illicit flooding of our borders. "We got nothing for the money," Trump said. "These Latin American governments had so little respect for the U.S. that they wouldn't even take their felons back from us after we caught them. Wouldn't even let the planes land. Yet now they have no problem with it. So, while saving the United States billions of dollars in taxpayer-funded foreign assistance programs, which yielded naught but lawlessness, betrayal, misappropriation, and misery, Trump has been able to work out extradition treaties and other important deals with countries who formerly laughed at us." In the Bible, it is always the good kings, not the profligate ones, who build walls. The book of Nehemiah is dedicated exclusively to the great and godly work of the man who takes it upon himself to build a defensive fortification around Jerusalem during the time of the Persian Empire. Latinos, with their conservative values, love Donald Trump, and he has gained more support from the Hispanic community of America than any other Republican president since Reagan, and probably more, but we'll find out after the election. Those among them who are better acquainted with the singular horrors of living under a socialist or a communist regime, such as Cubans or Venezuelans, are especially likely to render him their support. And it is more than apparent that Donald Trump loves them as well.
There it is. Come here. Let me have that. Come here. So let me say this. Where are you from?
I'm from Colombia.
Colombia.
I'm Hispanic.
And is this a setup? Did I ever meet you before? Huh?
I'm Hispanic and I vote for Mr. Trump. We vote for Mr. Trump. Yes, Mr. Trump. We love you.
Thank you.
We love you. All the way to the White House.
I swear to you, I think she's totally beautiful and great. I never met her before, I swear. Crazy. We're working night and day to deliver a future of limitless opportunity for our nation's Hispanic American citizens, including millions and millions of extraordinary Mexican Americans who enrich our society strengthen our country, serve in our military, and contribute immensely to our shared American family. And I want to just tell you that Mexico is doing a great job for us on the border, and I want to thank the President of Mexico.
Trump, 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 this Latino's gonna vote for Trump. Trump, 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 this Latino's gonna vote for Trump. Trump, 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 this Latino's gonna vote for Trump. Trump, 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 this Latino's gonna vote for Trump, for Trump. Let's get it straight. Who am I gonna vote for? I'll vote for the man who tells me the truth, the one that we have prayed and hoped for. Let's get it straight. Who am I gonna follow then? The answer is simple. His name is Donald, who's gonna make us great again. And I, as a Latino, want my people to understand. Let's put an end to political correctness and make you comprehend. Trump, Trump, this Latino's gonna vote for Trump. Who you gonna vote for? Trump, 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 this Latino's gonna vote for Trump. Vote for Trump. Trump, Trump, this Latino's gonna vote for Trump. Better believe it, Mr. Bush. It's not an act of love. You just can't let a stranger walk into your home without asking him where he's coming from. You gotta build the wall. You gotta make it big. You gotta make it big. You gotta make it tall. You gotta make it tall. Oh, you gotta build the wall. Build it. Make it big. Build it. You gotta make it tall. Oh, Trump, Trump, this Latino's gonna vote for Trump. Vote for Trump. Trump, Trump, this Latino's gonna vote for Trump. Gonna make America great again. Trump, Trump, this Latino's gonna vote for Trump. Trump, 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 this Latino's gonna vote for Trump. God bless the USA. Trump, Trump, this Latino's gonna vote for Trump. Puerto Rico. Trump, Trump, this Latino's gonna vote for Trump. Vote for Trump, Trump, this Latino's gonna vote for Trump. Este latino votará por Trump. Este latino votará por Trump. Este latino votará por Trump. Este latino votará. Este latino votará por Trump. Este latino votará. Este latino votará por Trump. Este latino votará.
The election is at hand. If you're a Republican, if you're an independent, even if you're a Democrat, get out there and vote for President Trump. And 4 more years of prosperity, peace, personal liberty, and the protection of American rights and values. The need is urgent, the path is straight, the cause is righteous, and our choice is clear.